Feld. I am, if you know Lauren Kramer, I'm her dad, and I've been her dad ever since she was born. And today I'm here because Lauren had called me and realized that for many years, for almost 15, 20 years, I would do exactly what I'm doing now, which was reading Dr. Seuss stories and other stories to kids in the schools I worked at, which are in Brooklyn, New York. And I did this up until the 1988, 1989, and there were no iPhones, there were no there was no internet, there was no Facebook, none of that. But even in those days, compared to now, the one thing that is timeless is the love of literature and reading. And my reading, if I had done this now, if I was still doing this, would be the same sort of audiences, the same books, the same messages that there were many years ago. Dr. Seuss never wrote a book. He passed away about 24 years ago. He was like in his late 80s. And toward the end of his life, he would write children's books. I mean, adult books. But until then, he wrote children's books, never thinking in advance of what he was trying to teach. He would write the book because he had the idea, he loved the idea of the story, and he figured the kids would be able to figure out the morals by themselves. These two are the books I loved reading probably more than any. The Sneetches and Other Stories, and there's one called The Zacks, which is also in the same book that I'm going to read. And if there's time, Horton Hatches the Egg. Can you kind of predict what... Now here's two, what they call Sneetches. There really were no such things as Sneetches. One has that green star, the other has nothing on them. Can you kind of figure out what's going to happen in the story from this? Predict something? What do you think? Can you predict what would happen?
Like, the other one is lonely because you don't have...
Because a silly thing like it doesn't have a star.
Yeah.
You kind of have it. And, of course, there's a lesson to be learned at the end. And we'll find out what that lesson is. Now, the star-bellied Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-bellied Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big. They were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-bellied Sneetches would brag. We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches, with the snoots in the air. They would sniff and they'd snort, would have nothing to do with the plain-bellied sort. And whenever they met someone they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the star-bellied children went out to play ball, could the plain-bellies get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your belly had stars, and the plain-bellied children had none upon theirs. When the star-bellied Sneetches had frankfurter roast or picnics or parties or marshmallow toast, they never invited the plain-bellied Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year, a long time. Then one day it seems, while the plain-bellied Sneetches were moping and doping, alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and keen, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean, and I've heard of your troubles, I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you, I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine, and he said, "You want stars like a star-bellied Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared, and it clunked, and it bumped, and it jerked, and it burked, and it bopped them about. But the thing really worked. When the plain-bellied Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties. Now we can go to your frankfurter parties." "Good grief!" groaned the ones who had stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst." But now, how in the world do we know? They all frowned. If what kind is what, or the other way round? Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who. That is perfectly true. But come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches. And all it will cost you is $10 each. Belly stars are no longer in style, said McBean. What you need is a trip to my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on Mars. And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout. Oh, we know who is who, now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without. Then, of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you'll probably guess, things really got into a horrible mess. All the rest of that day, on those wild, screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again, through the machine, they raced around and about again, changing the stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept running through, till neither the planes or Starbellies knew whether which one was what one, what one was which one, or which one was what, or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up, and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn. Nope, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong, I'm quite happy to say, that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars, and whether they had one or not, upon theirs. So McBean said the Sneetches will never learn. Do you think they did learn? Do you think the Sneetches actually did learn? What did they learn?
Like, it don't matter, they're different.
You got it. It doesn't matter. It took a lot of money for them to learn. McBean was a good businessman. He started at $3 to go through, then up to $10. He left with a lot of money, but the Sneetches left with a very valuable lesson. You really don't judge people by how much they weigh, or they look, their hair, whether they're white, black, Asian, whether they have long hair, whether they have short hair. Basically, you judge a person by what's inside them and not silly things that we call the exterior, things on the outside. Dr. Seuss, right in the same book, wrote a story I also used to love reading called The Zacks. And again, you could almost take the moral of this story and you do it in around 2 words about being, and see if you could tell me afterwards what the moral of this story is going to be. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. Look here now, the north-going Zack said. I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zack, and I always go north. Get out of my way now, and let me go forth. Who's in whose way? Snapped the south-going Zacks. I always go south, making south-going tracks, so you're in my way, and I ask you to move, and let me go south in my south-going groove. Then the north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. I never, he said, take a step to one side, and I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. And I'll prove to you, yelled the south-going Zacks, that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge. That's my rule, never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here, not budging. I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still. Well, of course the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there, standing unbudged in their tracks. Now, unlike the Sneetches, where you know at the end that they learned their lesson, do you think the Zacks learned their lesson? How do you know they didn't learn their lesson? Well, because they're still standing there, year after year after year, through the snow and through the rain, through the summers, they never moved. And of course, Dr. Seuss, and again, when he wrote the books, he wasn't really thinking of the moral. He said he'll write the book, and then the moral will just come by itself. And it did in this story. It's obvious. There's reasons you should stick to what you think, that if you have commitment, that's a tough word, but you really believe in something, that's fine. But to be this stubborn, just to be foolish, is really foolish. It's dumb. My one story that I never ever